Welcome. My name is Bill Brennan. I'm part of Illumin. I've been part of Illumin since, I can't even remember, probably at least 2007 when I made my first rites of passage and followed that up with the firming. And I've been listening to Richard Rohr since 1980. I consider him my mentor and my spiritual father. And I'm grateful you've joined me today for this talk on King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. And before we get started, I would just encourage you to relax, sit back. And for me, what helps me a lot is just to take deep breaths to help me to calm, to help me to arrive in the moment. So I would encourage you to just sit back and relax for a couple minutes and just close your eyes if you want. And just be aware you're breathing. Breathe in deep and slow and breathe out deep and slow. Breathe in to the count of 4, hold for 2, and breathe out to the count of 8. If you want, breathe any way you want, but just let's take some time to be aware of our breathing and just to arrive in this moment. Whenever you come out of a time of silence, do it gently. Ask God to feather God's peace into the rest of your day like a painter feathers one color into another with his brush, and gently open your eyes. We're going to be talking about archetypes today, and for those of you who are not really sure what they are, an archetype is real simple but complex. It's a mysterious energy that flows out of your subconscious. I like the analogy of like a magnet beneath a sheet of paper with iron filings on it. And the filings kind of arrange themselves in patterns along the lines of the magnetic force, right? I'm sure you've done that. And if you haven't, you can imagine what that looks like. Well, archetypes are kind of like that. They're a mysterious energy in your subconscious. And they manifest in our life and in our culture. And they've been around for centuries. And most people are not aware of them. But Madison Avenue is real aware of them. And they use them. They use these symbols to manipulate us, to buy products. Archetypes will really help you in your spiritual life, in your psychological life. I'm going to be giving you a lot of information about my personal life and also about what the archetypes are, how they manifest in our lives, and how you can access them. So if you're not in the mood to take notes, you don't have to. If you want to, you're more than welcome to. But if you don't feel like it, that's fine. I strongly recommend that you get a book called King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover by Robert Moore. And I think it's William Gillette, but it's Moore and Gillette. Again, King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover by Moore, M-O-O-R-E, and Gillette. And most of what you need to know in basic form is in that book. We'll begin with the warrior. When I was a kid, about 5 years old, I was already in touch with the warrior inside of me. I had a hero. His name is Diver Dan. He would go under the water in one of those old-fashioned, huge underwater diving masks, like made out of iron, you know, real old-fashioned looking, with the oxygen tube going down from the surface to his helmet. And he would go on adventures. And you think that would have been an indication to me that I would become a psychotherapist and a trauma therapist. But at 5 years old, I had no idea what those things were. I just knew I liked Diver Dan. Superman, Jungle Jim, Wyatt Earp, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. Remember Combat? Vic Morrow, the sergeant in Combat? The Rat Patrol, Bat Masterson, but especially Daniel Boone and Sherlock Holmes. These were all heroes of mine growing up as a kid. And I'll say more about Daniel Boone and Sherlock Holmes as we go on. I would leave the house looking for adventures. I played Army with my friends. I grew up protesting the war, but as a kid, I loved to play Army. We'd go down to this hothouse nursery where they had peat moss in bales, like big squares of peat moss, and they would make great grenades because they would break into peat moss shrapnel when we threw them at each other. One time, this girl that I was in love with, who lived next door to me, my first girlfriend, we were about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old. And all the teenagers were across the street shooting pea shooters at her and her brother. So I just happened to come out of the house at that point, and I had a cape on and I had my 2 6 guns, and I was going to protect Debbie and Joey. And I got between them and the pea shooters like a superhero. And I was having a great time until I realized, well, now those peas were going to hit me. And I really got in touch with, at a young age, a difference between fantasy, what I'm imagining, and what's real. But I was able to protect her and held the cape up and got them out of the line of fire, at least. I remember protecting a girl who I had a crush on in 8th grade, was being pelted by snowballs after the blizzard that we had. I was able to get between her and the throwers, hoping I'd make some points. All these things were motivated by the warrior inside me. I was bullied in freshman year of high school. In the Bronx, in New York, wasn't a good thing. And later in that year, somebody else started to bully me, and I got so fed up, I took him into the backfield and beat the shit out of him. That's how you gain respect in the Bronx, New York, when I was in high school about 50 years ago. You had to establish some kind of respect. All that was the warrior inside me. At age 25, I was in a dead-end job, going nowhere. Someone suggested I become a postal worker because they were paid good money at that time. Well, you had to pass this test. And I hated my job so much, I was willing to do anything. But it was the kind of test where you had to memorize numbers. I was terrible at numbers, math, or just memorizing anything. But I studied for this postal test every single day in any free time I had when my boss wasn't looking, sitting at my desk. You had to memorize these addresses in order to pass the test and do well. I brought my grade up so high in this test as I studied on the dead-end job that I scored an 89, and I was able to get stationed in a post office 15 minutes from my house, exactly where I wanted to be. It was the warrior inside me that got me to stick to that study process, even though I hated it, because I wanted something better. And the warrior part of me helped me to stay focused and do what I really didn't feel like doing. Once I became a letter carrier for the post office, I had to tolerate all kinds of New York City weather. The blizzards didn't bother me that much, And I learned really quickly that if you walk fast, you could stay warm in any kind of weather. The problem was if you were stuck in 40-degree rain or if you had slush, it was like walking through water with 40-pound weights on either leg. That didn't happen too often with the slush, but you know what? The New York weather happened every year on schedule. It was the warrior inside me that helped me to stick to that job for 8 years. 8 years until I realized that there's no way I can do this for 30 years. So I decided I'll study about addiction and become an addictions counselor in the post office. It'll be perfect. It's exactly what I wanted to do. And you could go into Manhattan and get the credentials you needed to get. So 2 nights a week after work, for 2 years, I schlepped into Manhattan and studied addictions counseling. Problem is, when I got out, I came to realize that there was one addiction counselor for every 3,000 people in the post office at that time. And I wasn't going to get his job unless he retired. I was pretty frustrated at that point, but you know what? It was the warrior inside me that got me to stick to that process for 2 years. And it taught me I wanted to be a therapist so bad that I was willing to go and get my degree, my master's degree. The only way I could do that is to move out of New York, because you had to quit for a year and get an internship as a social worker, and we couldn't afford to do that financially. My wife got a transfer down to South Florida. We were able to move down there, and I got my master's. But studying for that master's was not easy, not because it was that difficult study-wise. It was difficult with some of the professors that I had. Some of them really didn't know what they were talking about, and it was very frustrating. I call them false magicians, but I stuck it out. Again, the warrior inside me helped me to keep my eyes focused on the goal, and I was able to get my master's degree. There were also excellent teachers in that master's program also, and they inspired me to hang in there. I was able to admire and emulate the warrior inside them. Once I got my master's, I traveled 45 minutes south to a psychiatric hospital that really was in a sick building, a building with mold in parts of it, run by what I call dark magicians, men that really were mismanaging the place and not giving the customers, the clients, the best care that they could get. But I stuck to it. For 15 months, I hung in there. And I wound up meeting my psychological mentor there. Talk more about that later. I hung in there for 15 months, and at the same time, I would have to travel 45 minutes north to go to my private practice 3 nights a week. After working 8 hours, there was some days when I really didn't feel like going. But you know what? It was a great opportunity for growth and for becoming more proficient at my craft. It was the warrior inside me that helped me to stick to that process until I wound up getting a better job full-time, again, 15 minutes from my house in a different psychiatric hospital. What do I mean when I say warrior? Well, each of the archetypes, the warrior, beginning with the warrior, has a shadow side, a negative side. And my negative or shadow warrior shows up inside me when I'm critical, when I'm insecure, when I fear vulnerability, when I get really performance oriented and overdo the doing and let go of being, when I take too much abuse from people and then explode. Knowing this about myself, it helps me avoid those traps. What does the warrior look like? A healthy warrior energizes, motivates, faces a problem or a situation. helps you to think clearly, is discerning, alert, awake, aware, knows what he wants and how to get it, accurately evaluates circumstances, adapts, is detached, creative, persevering, is focused energy for a cause. The warrior, a healthy warrior, is courageous, knows his capabilities and limitations. Remember Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry? A good man knows his limitations. Flexible, sharply perceptive, knows how fragile life is, intensely experiences and appreciates life, able to take decisive action, is willing to be trained, physically and emotionally self-controlled. I like the word self-managed because control really doesn't exist. Able to say no to self, has a positive mental attitude, is loyal to a cause greater than himself, is committed, generative, lives in the present moment, and submits to a healthy king. How do you establish a relationship with your warrior? Well, here's a few simple ways. Like I said before, know your limitations. Be humble. Get the help you need when you need it. Watch a movie about a warrior. Read a biography about a warrior. Another warrior I didn't mention was Admiral Bill McRaven. He narrated the bin Laden takedown for President Obama back in 2011. And he wrote a book about some of his exploits called Sea Stories. I strongly recommend it. Talk to the warrior part of you and ask him for help. Ask God to move through you as warrior. Notice the warriors you admire. Why do you admire them? Act as if. Be assertive, decisive. Challenge yourself. Stand up to injustices you care about and develop discipline. That's the warrior. Just notice what you're feeling right now after hearing that. The next one is the magician, the wise one. Magician means magus or wise one. It doesn't mean somebody who's going to pull a rabbit out of their hat. Some examples to me, heroes of mine that are magicians. The famous psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Jung, Sherlock Holmes and Daniel Boone, as I mentioned before. They were big heroes of mine because not only were they in touch with the warrior part of themselves, but they were cunning and crafty and creative and intelligent. They had secret knowledge. They were dedicated to a craft, and they had hidden knowledge that they were willing and able to share when necessary. But the key with a magician is not so much performance. It's that they have hidden knowledge and they're willing and able to be dedicated to their craft. Thomas Merton. Megan McKenna, she's a theologian and an excellent storyteller. She would tell us stories with a punch, kind of like Jesus' parables. And she'd make you really think and reflect on your own soul. Gandalf. My former spiritual director, the Quaker, John Youngblood. His wife was a correspondent with Thomas Merton, and she and he had arranged for Thomas Merton to give a retreat to Dr. Martin Luther King here behind me, the month he was killed. John Youngblood was whiter than me, and he lived in Atlanta, and he worked very strongly for the civil rights movement. Took his life in his hands every day and survived. But he stuck out like a white thumb and didn't care. He worked for the civil rights movement in a very dedicated way. Robert Bly, Bernie Siegel. He's a pioneer in psychoneuroimmunology, how your mind and your body can help each other to heal. Bob Ross, the painter on PBS. The people that he's mentored have taught me how to paint really well, actually, for the first time in my life. Good example of a wise one, a magician with hidden knowledge, and a healthy magician because he's willing and able to share that knowledge. Jack Mostyn, Irish Christian brother. Marianne Schofield, a nun. Jack Mostyn taught me spiritual direction. And I'll never forget how he cured me of my self-doubt. He was an expert in contemplative spiritual direction. One day he said to me, "Bill, you know this shit." And I never thought of spiritual anything to be referred to with the word shit before, and it just cracked me up. But it also empowered me and gave me confidence that I really knew what I was doing. Marianne Schofield taught me how to supervise spiritual directors. Turns out she and Jack down the road went on to found Spiritual Directors International, and I was able to sit at their feet. Father Benedict Groeschel, who I'll talk more about in a few minutes. The Three Stooges. There's a manifestation of the magician called the Holy Fool. Red Skelton, another holy fool, but he was also a shapeshifter, which is another manifestation of the magician archetype. He would come out with all these different characters and in different costumes, and he would look like a totally different person. And he was always funny, and he could always laugh at himself. He's a real hero of mine. And Dr. Bill Tollefson, the man who trained me in trauma work that I met in that hospital that I talked to you about. He's probably forgotten more about trauma than most people know. And he taught me pretty much almost everything I know about trauma and helping people to recover from it. You ever get lost in a creative flow and lose track of time? That's the magician inside you that gets you so into that creative flow, you just lose track of time. The magician empowers me to see through my clients' words and understand what's truly going on with them, and to use the best healing modalities I know to empower their choices for change and fulfillment. But he helps me to see through things. Because of the magician, I have a really good bullshit detector. It goes off. Good example of magician energy, which I initially thought was warrior energy, but it really is magician energy. When I was in freshman year of high school, it was a big year for me. I was lousy at basketball. Everybody knew how to play basketball better than I did. I looked like a pregnant hippopotamus with cerebral palsy on the basketball court. I was not good. And one day I got so fed up in sophomore year. Yeah, it was more sophomore year. I said, I got to get good at this. I'm tired of the guys laughing at me. So I went down the block. It was only down the block that there was a junior high with all these basketball courts. I could have been practicing all that time. Finally, I just gave in and practiced day after day after day, a good hour, hour and a half every day. And I'd start to get hungry and I'd want to go home. But there was something inside me that said, all right, you can go home after you get 7 baskets in a row. And I would get to the 6th basket and miss one and have to start all over again. But I stuck to it day after day, competing pretty much against myself. The very last day turned out to be, in hindsight, the last day of gym class in sophomore year. I was the high scorer. I was swishing from all over the court. And that was because of the magician energy inside me get me to hone my craft. Now I'd like to talk to you about the man who inspired me to get into the field that I'm in today, Father Benedict Rochelle. The lady who turned out to be my wife and I were looking for Christian fellowship when we were single. We went to Marble Collegiate Church, Norman Vincent Peale's church, 5th Avenue and 29th Street in Manhattan. They were having a young adult meeting down there. We show up, and who's there but a Catholic Franciscan friar with the cowl and the sandals and the rope and the whole thing. And I looked at my girlfriend and I said, it figures we can't get away from Catholics no matter where we go. At the end of his talk, I shook his hand, said, I really enjoyed your talk, because I sincerely did. The man was fascinating. I turned to walk away. He singled me out. He tapped me on the shoulder, put all his stuff down on the stage, pulled out one of his cards and said, Bill, if you ever want to talk, give me a call. And he gave me his card. Thought it was odd, and I didn't think much of it, and moved along. Little did I know that weeks later, when I realized I was getting serious about this woman I was dating, the lady that went with me to Norman Vincent Peale's church, I was getting scared. She's a widow with 2 kids, and I was a senior in college. What the heck was I doing? I told her I didn't think it was going to work out, and she cried. But the next day I heard inside myself, when I was working my part-time maintenance job, how would you feel if you never saw her again? I believe that was the magician inside me, the wise one inside me, because I was so repulsed by that thought. I called her up and I said, remember that priest that we met at Marble Collegiate Church? He was a shrink. Why don't we call him and run this by him and see what he thinks? This guy spent good 3 hours with us. I'll never forget it. It was November 20th, 1976. It was the week before Thanksgiving. We went up to Larchmont, New York. That's where he lived. He lived in a garage next to a mansion. He comes running out of the garage as we pull up, gestures to the mansion, which is a priest's retreat house that he kind of supervised. And he says, Bill, if this is poverty, can you imagine chastity? He was a real piece of work. And he spent 3 hours with us. This guy didn't have 3 minutes. I didn't know who he was. He was in charge of spiritual development of the lady for the Archdiocese of New York. I didn't know this. He was Cardinal Cook's spiritual director. I didn't know this. But at the end of the 3 hours, I didn't know what he was doing. But when you go for a walk with somebody like me, you're getting shrunk inside out and backwards. And that's what he did. And at the end of that time, he said, go softly and slowly. This could work. He affirmed our relationship. Later, about a year and a half later, I called him. We were involved in the charismatic renewal. We had 100 people showing up to our prayer group. And we were getting some strange people showing up there. So I called him. I said, Father, what do we do to help these people? And he said, well, Bill, I'm offering this course in spiritual direction. Why don't you come up and check us out? With his Jersey accent. So we went up to Yonkers, New York, and checked it out. We decided to take the course, a 2-year survey course in theology, mysticism, spiritual direction, and counseling, all in 2 years. We got a survey of every mystic for the last 4,000 years. So when I went to Richard Rohr's Living School, it wasn't altogether new. He taught us mysticism, depth psychology, not just spiritual direction and theology, but Vatican II, the history of mysticism. He taught us the value of ministry to the poor. His idea of a good time on Thanksgiving was giving out hundreds of turkeys to families. Same thing at Christmas. And I would say, Benedict, why would you want to be with the poor on Christmas? That's so depressing. Until I came with him one Christmas to check it out. And I came to realize exactly why he did what he did. He was a piece of work. He was also a shapeshifter. One time he was in Manhattan, he saw a mugging going down. This woman was holding on to her purse, and the mugger was trying to pull it away from her. He went up behind the mugger, pulled his cowl up over his head and went like that. Scared the hell out of the mugger. The mugger ran down the street and the lady was saved. He was a piece of work. He had a photographic memory. He could take you anywhere in Europe and tell you what went on in that spot in history hundreds of years ago. He modeled for me my vocation. I wanted to become a psychotherapist after I got to know him. And he put together psychology and spirituality so harmoniously. I'll tell you more about why that was important in a minute. But just know that you can find parts of you mirrored in other people. Keep your eyes out and notice what you notice about them. If you're fascinated by somebody or some experience, it's a sign of an archetype. I bought a house not long after that with my wife, and we had our own fireplace for the first time. But it was painted over with paint. It took me 2.5 days to strip this thing down to the wood and stain it. And that was it wasn't the warrior, it was the magician inside me, again, get me to hone this craft so I can enjoy this fireplace. And it fascinated me. And the reason it fascinated me, I found out later, symbolically, fire is a symbol of intuition and insight. And so I got this whole thing done after 2.5 days, lit my first fire in my own home, my first colonial home. And I listened to Richard Rohr's first set of tapes with this first fire on male spirituality. I cried through half of it because it named parts of my soul I didn't even know existed. And because of Richard, I came to realize what a gift, how many gifts my father gave me. I used to just focus on what he didn't give me. And Richard woke me up to how much my dad gave me in terms of my spirituality, awareness of the value of my soul, a longer list than I can list here. And I had the wherewithal to take him out to dinner and spend the time to thank him. And it was all because of Richard's first set of tapes. Years later, the only time I ever went camping with the guys, I walked on water. No, I'm not psychotic. I did walk on water. Some of the guys wanted to climb the mountain. My buddy and I figured we'll go fishing. There was only one fishing pole, and I'm standing there, all right, God, here I am at this river. What am I going to do, you know? And I looked down, and there were stones in the water, but they were flat. So they were the exact height of the water, and you could step on them. They were stepping stones, and they were there naturally. Nobody put them there. And I figured, oh, let me step on them. So I kept stepping and stepping and stepping. And I turned around to my buddy, Mike. I said, Mike, look, I'm walking on water. And I don't swim, but I didn't even care. I just kept walking. I walked out a good 25, 30 yards or more, and then went another 10 or 15. And if I didn't go that extra 10 or 15, I wouldn't have seen. There was another river crashing into my river. And I was about 15 yards from that point. And it was the most powerful thing I ever saw in nature, whether it be on television, in the movies, or in real life. The power of these two rivers coming together. And it was at that very point that I had confirmed inside me, you are to go to get your master's and put together psychology and spirituality. I knew that I knew that I knew. That was the magician inside me. God inside me is wise one, leading and guiding me. I have a shadow in my magician aspect. I've self-sabotaged, thought too much, isolated myself, envied others who seemed to have more life and share more life than I did with other people, feared being seen as an imposter. But that's not all there was to my magician. The wise one inside me has secret hidden knowledge, as I said, gladly shares that knowledge, is aware of and able to contain and channel energy, sees into the depths of people and situations, has an inner bullshit detector, is intuitive, knowing, able to apply knowledge, is aware, insightful, able to handle a crisis, able to help me to make insightful decisions, has the ability to detach, has healer aspects, restores life and wholeness, can enter sacred space and time through music, hobbies, long walks in the woods, images, meditation, enters sacred space and can hold sacred space, the places where we experience the power to change and become who we are. Places like church, the woods, anywhere in nature, meetings, councils, or initiations. How do you access the wise one inside you? Well, observe your thoughts. Be the watcher and noticer. If you want to get really good at it and hone that skill, get a book called Practicing the Power of Now. Eckhart Tolle is a major mentor of mine also. Practicing, keyword, practicing the power of now, will help you to live in the present moment. Not only the warrior, but the wise one will help you to do that. Silence, being dedicated to a craft or a mission. Creativity, spending time mastering a skill. Find yourself a mentor. Find an image that speaks to you of the healthy expression of the wise one, like Gandalf or whoever it is for you. Study the life of a man you admire who exemplifies these traits. Act as if you already have the wisdom, experience, strength, and hope to share with someone after you really listen well to them. Next, the lover. Notice how you feel right now before we get into the lover. How do you feel hearing about the wise one, the magician? The lover. Some examples of the lover. St. Francis, Bill Plotkin, Belden Lane, our buddy in Illumin. If you don't know Belden Lane, and if you ever get a chance to spend time with him, please do. Give yourself a gift. Thomas Merton, my sponsor in my 12-step group, Bill. His name was Bill. I got involved in 12-step groups. I'm not an addict, but I have the same stinking thinking of any addict I ever worked with and ever met. It's called codependency. And I worked a program on that and still do, hopefully. Christine Walters Paintner. She has a website that I strongly recommend called Abbey of the Arts. She'll really help you tap your creativity. David Stendelrest, the monk. Mark Nepo, the writer. Thomas More, who wrote Care of the Soul. Patricia Carpentier. She is a mentor of mine, a writing mentor. I used to be an old soul as a kid, and the shadow lover aspect shows up in me when I don't feel much beside happy, sad, angry, lonely, or bored. When I was a kid, I spoke only in a monotone, and I got codependently addicted to relationships. My self-esteem rose and fell on whether or not the women in my life were happy with me. I had to fix everybody in every situation, and I was addicted to my thoughts. Today, I've developed awareness of and the ability to express a wide range of feelings. That began for me when I went on a marriage encounter in 1980, where my life went from black and white to living color. I cried so much on that weekend, I filled a handkerchief. It's a weekend that you go on with your wife, and you learn to express what you need to say and listen to what you need to hear. And I learned that there was a whole rainbow of emotions. I had no idea what that was about when I was 25 years old. I strongly recommend Marriage Encounter, but not if somebody's marriage is on the rocks. Only if you have an average relationship and you'd like it to improve. Another experience I had of lover energy is in Sands Point Preserve in Port Washington, New York. I talk about the lover because the lover puts you in touch with beauty, and especially the beauty of nature. My wife and I went to Sands Point Preserve and started walking on this trail. And I experienced God during this period of time like God was air, or God was smoke in the air. You know how smoke can fill the air? That's how deeply I experienced God on this day. It was October of 1987. It was the day, I think it was the 17th, the day before a big stock market crash. And it was such a powerful experience of God. I hadn't been the same since. I experienced God like the air, and I felt one with God. It wasn't so much that I felt or knew. It was just a reality. It was the reality. And I knew it experientially. And it was expressed in the beauty of this preserve. I had been in preserves before, but never had an experience like this. We kept walking down this trail. We come upon this mansion. And I said to my wife, Joy, I said, you know what this is? She goes, no. I said, this is the mansion in The Godfather with the scene with the guy with the horse's head in the bed. This is where it happened. And that's the mansion it was. This was a strange day for me, believe me. We kept walking, followed the trail down to the beach. And there's a guy walking with his girl on the beach. And I said to him, you know, you're a dead ringer for Phil Simms, the giant quarterback. He said, well, that's because I am. I was in shock because I've been a Giant fan and still am to this day for years. I was in awe in more ways than one that day. All because I listened to the lover and followed the trail of beauty. Only thing is I didn't think to ask for Phil's autograph, but I didn't want to invade his privacy any more than I did. There was a football strike going on. That's why he was there that Sunday. The lover archetype draws you to beauty. What does a healthy lover look like? Gives you a sense of vividness, romance, of aliveness, enthusiasm, passion, energy, a drive to satisfy hunger for not just food, but for well-being and relatedness. Creative adaptation to life and life's hardships, a sense of meaning and spirituality, sensitivity to outer environment, aware of what our five senses tell us and our psychological responses to it. The lover speaks using images, plays, enjoys sensuous pleasure without shame, feels connected to all of life. Sensitivity, compassion, empathy, openness to the collective subconscious images that you become aware of. The lover enjoys touching and being touched physically and emotionally, profoundly enjoys beauty, experiences the joy and pain of life, is aware of shifts in others' moods and their hidden motives, is unconventional, artistic, open to ESP, creative, a connoisseur, feels feelings without the pressure to perform, can be an idealist, a dreamer, and longs for a better world for self and others. How do you access the lover? Slow down and see beauty in simple things instead of just consuming. Eat mindfully. Go on romantic dates. Focus on the beauty of what you already have and appreciate that. Eat mindfully, as I said, have nourishing experiences. Don't take pictures with your camera, receive them. Cultivate a fun hobby. Spend regular time in nature. Feel and express gratitude for things, people, or creative work that you've brought into the world. Now, notice how that has made you feel, the lover energy. Lastly, the king. An example of a king is right behind me, Dr. Martin Luther King, Richard Rohr, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu. King energy usually doesn't manifest until our 50s, but it can happen before that. It usually comes once the previous 3 archetypes are online, because it pulls them all together. My shadow king is the weakling king. Would manifest at times when I would assume my wife was enabling some relatives due to my own lack of inner peace and harmony, assuming she was being disloyal to our agreements. I would get angry and controlling. But I worked, as I said, a 12-step program, Recovery for Codependency, and I was helped to manage and rein that in. I got a sponsor whose name was Bill. And Bill was an alcoholic, drug addict, in recovery, of course, cocaine addict, sex addict, gambleaholic, adult child of an alcoholic. There's very few 12-step groups he didn't qualify for. And this guy had a peace and a Mona Lisa smile and a broad smile that was usually on his face. He was a genuinely happy man because he worked the program and walked his talk. And I was gifted with this man as a sponsor. He carried king energy for me. He was centered and calm. I wasn't conscious of manifesting king energy until some of my patients told me, my clients told me, that my calm centered energy helped them to get calm. In hindsight, I remember putting my queen, my wife, on what I called her barge, a canoe that I bought, and taking her through the 5 fingers of this lake we lived on. It was powered by an electric motor because I was too lazy to row. And we'd pull under some shade trees and I would read to her. I read The Care of the Soul to her by Thomas More, and I also read her his book called Soulmates in this canoe. What I did was create calm, centered environment. And that's what kings do. What are some signs of a healthy king? Orderliness, creativity. You notice creativity runs through every one of these archetypes in some way as a theme. A good king is fertile, and that just doesn't mean physically fertile. It could mean generative in all kinds of creative ways. A healthy king blesses others and him or herself. Herself would be a queen, of course. This is very similar for women, except we call it queen energy. King energy uses his talent to serve others for their benefit. They have a very low anxiety level. They're centered and they're calm. They have an inner authority. Richard carries this king very well, Richard Rohr. He has this inner authority and it comes across. A good king is grateful and humble. Humble meaning down to earth, knowing his limitations. A good king cares deeply, genuinely, is respectful to others, is a centered participant in creating a just, calm, creative environment, is devoted to family, friends, and organizations he's affiliated with, and is aware that there is a God, is in relationship with God, and is very much aware that he is not God. How do you access King energy? Well, first, I'd like to strongly recommend the movie called The Edge. If you're not traumatized by men being chased through the woods by a bear, I strongly recommend this movie because Anthony Hopkins embodies King energy throughout the whole movie. This movie came out in like 1997. I think it's still available. And it's a profound movie. I was at the most depressed point of my life at that time. My wife dragged me to this movie. And at one point, Anthony Hopkins says, "You know why people die in the woods when they get lost?" He says, "Not starvation. They die of shame." As soon as I heard that, my ears perked up. I sat up in my seat and I was riveted to this movie. When I came home from the movie, I wrote, I think, 10 to 12 pages about the movie. The symbols and the archetypal symbols in this movie are throughout the whole thing. It's powerful. You'll see King energy in the character of Anthony Hopkins. So what else can you do to access the King? Know and do whatever brings you joy daily. As long as it's legal and doesn't hurt you or anybody else. Do something that gives you joy. Make a plan and live out of that plan. Build your dream and your dream will build you. Live according to your values and beliefs, not those of others, your values and beliefs. Live so that you can be proud of who you were when you died. Leave the world a better place than you found it. This is key, and I mentioned it before, and the sign of a good king. Praise and appreciate and bless others. If you express appreciation or praise for who others are or what they do, you're blessing them. Acknowledging and appreciating people heals their soul, and that's what a good king does. Good king blesses, and that's all Richard Rohr has ever done for me. Be you. Be congruent. Be who you are. If you're feeling something, notify your face. Allow yourself to feel what you feel and be genuine and real. Allow your thoughts, beliefs, and actions to be in agreement. It's called congruence. Take responsibility for your thoughts and behavior, especially those that need to change. And this will put you in touch with the king inside you. If you're interested in what we've looked at today, I strongly suggest that you join us in the Wild Man to Wise Man Council on Zoom. You can look for it in the marketplace that you'll have available to you through Solarize, the marketplace of different Illumina opportunities. Or you can write to me, you can email me, and I can give you day and time of this council. We're going to be going through the book Wild Man to Wise Man in a very soulful way. It's not going to be a book study. It's going to be an experience, a soulful experience of your own deep masculine spirit, your soul. You can always contact me at my email address, wbrennan, BRENNAN, the number 8, at CFL for Central Florida, .rr.com. That's wbrennan at wbrennan8 at cfl.rr.com. I'm really grateful that you joined me for this experience. and I'll be holding you in the light for the rest of your journey of illumination. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to contact me. God bless you.